Thank you very much, Constance, for your talk. You presented quite shocking examples of gender-based violence and pointed also out the limitations of current laws and current initiatives. But you also pointed out some pathways for change already, which I highly appreciated. I see already, I think, if the first participants raising their hands, that is very good. We will have now time for question and answers. And people are also switching on the cameras. It's also excellent. I think connection seems to be more stable. Let us start. I haven't noticed now the who was first, but maybe Margareta, would you like to start? Then Haron and then Hannah?
There were also two other hands that went up before I put mine up, and I don't, they flashed off already, I think.
Okay, maybe they come back. Just start and then
Okay.
Haron comes next. And
all right. Thank you so much, Constance, for your talk. It's really good getting the perspective on the ground in Ghana, and also the role of the traditional leaders, I think, is often not really well understood. So rather than vilifying all of the men in a particular region, an entire northern part of a country, really like identifying which of those traditional leaders are doing a better job of in terms of the decision making, and like what are the things that can be done to lobby them. So my question to you is if you could give some examples of the traditional leaders that you think are doing a good job, and if you think they would be willing to then speak with other traditional leaders to try to help them, like a kind of peer-to-peer learning between traditional leaders on the topic of gender-based violence.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, so yesterday, like I said, I was at an event which was also about the role of the traditional leaders in combating gender-based violence here in the Upper West region of Ghana. And one of the traditional leaders we had is actually such a great champion of women and girls' rights. He even runs a local radio program where he discusses the need to support women and girls' empowerment, where he discusses the need to eschew from violence against women and girls. And actually, I was really inspired to also hear that he takes steps beyond just doing these radio programs to meet certain people. For instance, certain men who have neglected their children, who have neglected their partners that they have had children with, and have neglected to perform their rightful responsibilities as fathers. He takes all of these on. He's working with the Department of Gender here and the DOFSU to be able to get justice for these kinds of girls. So we have chiefs like him, but they are not very many. And this is what I was saying. We are not taking the blame out of the men who exact this troubling violence against women. But the fact is that the norms are so deep-seated that, and there are a number of them who mean very well, but because they do not have the awareness, the kind of knowledge that Margarita, you and I have about gender, sometimes the approach, or even they tend to gloss over certain kinds of matters. So I have written together with my colleagues here in UBIT about how traditional leaders, the religious leaders, are perpetrators of gender-based violence, not by their actions, not by directly victimizing women, but by encouraging women to overlook the gender-based violence, or by telling them to do self-introspection, to think about what they have done that is eliciting the violent attack, for instance, or asking them to just simply carry their cross because it is their calling to be married to a man who is abusive and things like that. So there are a few of them like this chief who was at our event yesterday, and he really inspired a lot of us. And I'm actually looking for an opportunity to engage him closely. Yes, but there are also a lot that we will need to do the hard work of creating the critical awareness and then supporting them to develop the appropriate mindset or perspectives that are required to overcome gender-based violence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then Haron, would you like to maybe switch on your camera if you can, if not, and raise your question. Constance, may I keep a little bit the answers shorter, that Hannah has also a chance. I would have a question, maybe somebody else would also like to raise one. Haron, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Constance. The discussion was really interesting, and I was just following up, linking with the interaction that they had, especially in the informal sector in Kenya, especially in the informal settlement. There is, in Kenya, we have Kibera, which is one of the largest informal settlement in Kenya. And then you'll find that there's that aspect of traditional, that's the traditional governance, but now it's called the kind of the traditional knowledge. But the question that I just wanted is more of a brainstorming, which I find it very interesting, because I realize the way gender is being defined by the community, by the social setup, that is how the evolution of gender violence emerges. And then because you find that in some communities, the way they define gender might not be the same the way they define gender, because the conventional way of gender is being defined is that it's more of role and responsibility assigned to the male and female in the society. So you find that is where the context of the violence comes. So the question I just wanted to ask you, Dr. Constance, is what could be the main driver to gender violence, and why some households do not experience this gender violence? So it's something that I wanted to understand. You find that there are some households experience and there are some households do not experience. Is there any driver that this household experience gender violence and this household does not experience gender violence that you've interacted with? I'm interested to probably hear that from you. Thanks.
Okay, right. So in terms of drivers, okay, let me start off by saying that, as you know, we vary as individuals. So you may find two households in a village where one is more receptive of certain acts and behaviors, and one may not be very tolerant. So we cannot say that there are some generalized drivers or specific ones. But what I can say is that gender-based violence is a consequence of unequal power relations, one, but it is also deeply rooted in the cultures, the cultural norms that tend to frame or to cast violence as a normal part of our human interactions. So in many societies across northern Ghana, across many parts of Africa, traditionally or culturally, it is seen as acceptable to use physical beating as a way of correcting a child or a woman. And I know that during my ethnographic research, the community leaders sometimes could say that, you know, a woman is like a child. So if you don't beat her, she'll never learn to respect you. If she does this and then you beat her, next time she's unlikely to do the same. Again, within that same community, it won't be everyone who will be that violent. So in terms of like, you can have say, these are the generalized drivers, but it is for the sake of the people who will misuse their power that we need to create a greater awareness. We need to get the laws to work more effectively to protect those women who are victims of gender-based violence.
Francis, maybe just quickly, may I compliment what research shows across the world? It's really not, as Constance pointed out, it's not linked to poverty, it's not linked to religion, it's not linked to education. No. So you have it amongst highly educated academics in the north as you find amongst poor people. So I think that's also a key fact, that it's really the patriarchal and underlying societal norms are much more driving factor and the individual than attitudes than the outside. Of course, it can be more triggered in violent contexts and maybe also with more poverty, but that's not really the key driver or variable. No. Hannah, maybe looking at the time, please.
Thank you. Yeah. A quick question. I hope also it's you're able to respond to it quickly, Constance. We're talking here about the roles of traditional leaders, and I thought that was very, very interesting what you mentioned. Two aspects. One is in the beginning of the presentation, you gave a whole list of different traditional leader types, and if I recall correctly, the queens or the queen mums have a very eminent role to play. Are there any figures that about the role of the women leaders in terms of domestic violence? Do they make it worse, maybe because they're very much sat in the tradition, as what you were just saying, the woman has to respect the man, blah, blah, blah? Or is it so that the more power these ladies have, that maybe in those communities there might be more of an equality aspect, less violence to women? Are there data on that?
You mean the role of the queen mothers, or they themselves as victims or survivors of gender-based violence?
No, I was firstly thinking about the role of the queen mothers in terms of, gender violence in their communities, but maybe that is linked to what experience they themselves have made in the past.
Okay, so I don't know of any statistics in terms of the role they play, but we'll probably need to do an empirical research on their contribution. But at forums, they will often tell you that they mobilize the women, they talk to them, try to empower them. They also talk to the male community members. They get involved where there are issues of violence in the communities and all of that. Generally, that institution is positioned in the community to be able to empower women, and including helping to resolve issues of gender-based violence. The extent to which they do this is a matter that we will need to do empirical study to be able to establish. So, for instance, yesterday we had 4 queen mothers, and they all said, just like I have said, that these are the roles they play. But we need to really follow up to see whether they are telling us what they think advocates like us want to hear, or they are really doing it.
Yeah, thanks. So a new research project for you, Constance.
I know. Thanks, Hannah.
Okay.
Yes.
I would have one question, Constance. What would you, most of us here are from different research projects on agriculture and land use. Would you have any suggestion what we could do also better as research projects who do not directly work maybe on gender-based violence, but would you say we should also try to link up with traditional leaders, or do you have any other suggestion what we could do maybe better or improve in our projects?
Okay. Yes, obviously, like I said, the traditional leaders command so much respect in the rural areas, and within the context of the stigma surrounding accessing the legal systems and women risking losing their marriages and access to their children and all of that, this institution, the traditional leaders institution, is such an important actor that as researchers working with farmers, male and female farmers, it is really important for us to be able to work together with the traditional institutions. Obviously, we need to also be very careful because, like I said, some of them, our research shows that are the worst perpetrators of gender-based violence. So we need to be careful to not be dining with the monster himself, who comes in the skin of an advocate. Sadly, a lot of male advocates, well, there are some who really do quite great work, but there are a number of them too. When you begin to interact with them, you see that they have not on their own or by themselves unlearned the hyper-patriarchal values and beliefs that surround their own being and their relationships. So we can't count on these ones, but there's a lot of scope, first of all, to engage them. So yesterday, one of the women said, a gender desk officer said she was nearly beaten by this man when she tried to separate the man from beating his wife. And then she said, you see, but for people who intervene, he was going to beat me up. And I said, yes, but I think this gives you an opportunity to try to reach out to him. Who knows? You might end up helping him to change, to get to a realization that he doesn't gain, you know, by dehumanizing his wife in that manner. So what I'm trying to say is that we can obviously engage the traditional leaders, but also support those that we think need support. Like the chief we encountered, Tina, you and I, who said, you know, are you not asking for too much for women? That you need to begin perhaps to do some gender lessons about what the entire community stands to gain by giving whatever he calls too much for women to the women.
Okay. Thank you very much. We must, oh, Hannah, you have one more. Constance, do you still have a minute for a quick question, quick answer?
Yeah.
Cool.
I think someone wants to speak. Please, can you unmute Wasrate and then speak?
Yes. Thanks. Very quickly, Constance. You gave that very enlightening example of the chief that you met recently. How do you think that a person becomes more open to these modern ideas, right? And less traditional? Did this man have a particularly good education? Was he educated maybe in the urban areas, or was he, what makes somebody to be so different and so enlightened? Because those people, and that links to what Margareta said at the beginning, those people could form a network of those that then trigger others to follow their example.
Yes. Hannah, like Tina said, sadly, education really doesn't do much to help people to not be violent towards others. What this man said, which was very revealing, is that he said he is who he is today because of his mother. He said his mother was one of the father's youngest wives, which meant that at the time he was born, the father did not have resources to take care of them. His mother worked very hard and then supported them through their schooling and everything, you know. So he grew up already having so much respect for women. So I would say he's probably more in tune with his feminine side than many of the men around may be. But so I don't think it's so much of education, because we still find people, doctors, professors, who still can be quite violent towards their partners. So it's just a combination of issues. But I do agree. And like I said, that I am planning to engage him more. There is really scope for us to draw on his good example and to see how we can achieve greater change by way of facilitating processes for other traditional rulers to learn from what he's doing. And by the way, there are others. I just use his as an example, although there are not many.
Okay, then let us come to an end for today. I think there is much more room for discussion, and we will follow up, I think, in further talks on these topics. for today. Thank you very much, Constance, for your presentation and the discussion. Thanks to the whole audience. I was very happy to see so many of you here today. Also, thank you very much for your contributions. And with that, yes, again, thanks. I wish you a very nice afternoon and see most of you soon again. Bye.
Thank you very much, Tina, and thanks to everyone for coming. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.